There, it's Simon Mainwaring from We First, and I'm really excited to be sharing some thinking with you this morning. The topic today is really how do you build a culture of purpose, health, and well-being at your organization? How do you build a culture of health, purpose, and well-being? And I'll get into why that's so important in a minute. But as you see here on the screen, I'd love to use this time to answer your questions. So you've got a Q&A button at the end there, down the bottom there. And the instructions are in front of you on the screen as to how you submit a question or in the text box so I see it. And also you can email any questions you have to contact@wefirstbranding.com, and we will get those questions and we will answer them live during this webinar, but also we'll make sure we answer them afterwards. So why is this topic so important? Well, I think one of the most underrated areas that a brand can leverage to drive their growth, establish their leadership, and increase their productivity is the culture inside their organization. A lot of cultures at worst could be toxic. At best, they could be just, dysfunctional. And very few are as optimized as possible in terms of really unlocking the full value and fulfillment of the human capital that you invest in every day at your organization. So for those of you who haven't joined one of our webinars before, my name is Simon Mainwaring. I'm the CEO and founder of We First, and we're a creative consultancy that builds purpose-driven brands. We're here in Culver City in California where the rain has stopped. I know we're soft here. I know we've got no tolerance like people on the East Coast in the US and around the world, but at least the rain has stopped here. So great to meet those who I haven't met before. And what we're going to quickly touch on today is a number of different things, and then we're going to leave time at the end for questions. So do fire away with your questions throughout the webinar. The first is, we're going to look at the purpose imperative. Why is it important right now to really think about building a culture of purpose? What's the value of your personal purpose? What's the value of your company purpose? And then how do you build that with some key takeaways? And so let's dive into the purpose imperative. What an interesting time it is for us as all to be in business, and to be in marketing and to be building cultures within our organizations. To give you a little bit of context, the way we see it here at We First is this moment in time for marketing and branding is really an extension of some key broad stroke stages. The first being CSR, corporate social responsibility in the 80s and 90s, where really brands would do things for the environment or they'd do some philanthropy just to sort of shore up their impact credentials and to demonstrate the good works that they do. But then in the 2000s, as sustainability became more of a buzzword, both sustainability with a small s and then with a larger S, in the sense that it started to encompass how you treat your employees and your culture and your supply chain and what products you make and how you make them and diversity and inclusion, it really started to elevate this idea of corporate impact. And then in the most recent sort of 5 to 8 years, you've seen the slow but accelerating rise of this premium on purpose. And that's for a number of different reasons that I'll touch on. First is that we've got these younger demographics coming through, millennials and Gen Z, that really want to work for or buy products from companies that are doing good. Secondly, today's consumers are more aware than ever of the challenges we face, like climate change, plastic in the oceans, loss of biodiversity. And so, when you think about these cultural crises, when you think you've got connected, values-driven and consumers, it's not a surprise that purpose, as it applies to all aspects of your company, is becoming more important. And now we find ourselves at this incredible moment in time where we really do live in an era of movements. I think, probably two very powerful examples. What Nike did with a Colin Kaepernick spot not long ago for their 30th anniversary, where, they really elevated Colin, amongst other athletes, on the strength of his commitment to social justice and addressing the issue of violence against Black people here in the US. At the same time, in the last week, we've seen Gillette come out with their, manifesto against toxic masculinity, which has really ignited a debate around the country. And so, increasingly, as you see here, brands are being defined by their values. The product's the social proof of those values, and really the impact that you're having legitimizes that marketing. So as somebody who's been doing this for 25 years, it's a very, very different era where brands are really playing a much more impactful and meaningful and accountable role in cultural issues. And, a couple of very palpable examples, this weekend, tomorrow, in fact, is the Women's March here in Los Angeles. And, There we saw 2 years ago, the first Women March that was played out all around the world, which saw citizens, consumers self-organizing themselves. And then you see gun control, which tragically has become such a perennial issue here in the United States. On the strength of these self-organizing movements, this has been mapped across over to the private sector, to business. And you see things like delete Uber when there was that sort of toxic masculinity amongst the leadership, or issues around privacy and GDPR and so on Facebook and Google. All of these are now the new normals of business and marketing, and so much so that they've been codified in what are, the institutional magazines of the industry, whether it's Fortune magazine now having its Change the World list, which they launched in 2015, or Fast Company with its World Changing Ideas list. This is not our opinion. This is not anecdotal. This is not a few isolated examples. It really is the new normal for all the reasons that I touched on a moment ago. And so the takeaway here really is that purpose as a way of being is increasingly driving business growth, for no other reason than there's greater scrutiny on business. The people that work in business will make it possible. Employees and consumers and customers are increasingly looking for brands to play a positive role. And at the same time, we have these larger social crises, these compounding crises that affect one another and have a knock-on effect, shaping our daily experience of life. You put all those conditions together, and that's why this is going on. It's not rocket science. It's not a trend. It's not a flash in the pan. It really is something that's a function of very clear drivers. And so the key question here in terms of how this can benefit your brand is, how well do you understand your company purpose? Because that's the sort of starting point, the tip of the spear, which will allow you to attract the talent you want, to get the most out of the talent that you have, and to really make sure that the talent you have stays as long as possible. They want to feel like the work they're doing on a daily basis, the sweat equity that they bring to the table every day, is worthwhile. It gives their life meaning and significance, and they're doing something that resonates with them in terms of their values. So let's look at the value of personal purpose. It's interesting. It's almost, in my experience, the rise of purpose has almost gone backwards, in the sense that we used to talk about the mission, values, and vision of a company in isolation. And as an ad guy for years, 18 years, that was what I dealt with when you got a brief and you looked at the creative campaign you were going to create, craft. But purpose almost precedes that. It precedes your mission, because your mission is what you do to execute your purpose, but your purpose is why you exist. Now, building on that, we're seeing the rise of personal purpose. Why do you as an individual show up every day? What's your personal purpose in life? And then how does that inform your company purpose? So let's define what your personal purpose is. It's why you exist. What's uniquely you? It's your essence, but it's not your job or what you do in the execution of your job or how you do it, but rather your reason for being, your role in the world. So here's a couple of examples. The former CEO of Campbell's Soup, to serve as a leader, live a balanced life and apply ethical principles to make a significant difference. Or Richard Branson, to have fun in my journey through life and learn from my mistakes. And very, very different tonally, as you can imagine. They're all a function of someone's personality and where they are at any given moment in time. It was interesting, a couple of years ago, I was very fortunately invited to go and do some training on Necker Island with Richard Branson. And I got to stay in one of his homes there for a week. And then we had workshops in what was called the Great Temple up on Necker. And just an example of his personal purpose there, we did this workshop with 30 CEOs who'd flown in around the world, and it was an incredible experience. And at the end of the workshop, Richard came in and he goes, well, that's the end of the workshop. Fantastic, very exciting. And turned around and jumped into the pool. There's a pool that circles the Great Temple. And he said, come on, everybody in. And every single one of the CEOs emptied their pockets of their phones and everything else and jumped in the pool. And I got to tell you, never happened before, but it's a palpable demonstration of how he mixes personal purpose with company work. And it's something I'll never forget, and it's an experience that no one would forget, but it's this idea of learning and growing and building your business, but having fun on the way. So a real life example of Richard Branson bringing his personal purpose to life. But increasingly, you are seeing a new expectation on leaders, whether you're a solopreneur of a tiny startup or in the leadership team of a massive corporation, to really humanize your brand. And a great example is, Howard Schultz of Starbucks has just stepped down as chairman. When at that time, when at an annual shareholder meeting, he was asked, we don't necessarily, someone said, we don't necessarily believe in your defense of marriage and the ability to marry somebody that you love, or your right to marry someone you love. And he said, if you don't believe in marriage equality, feel free to sell your stock. And this is very much a function of the personal values of the CEO and by extension, the company. And it's a very exciting time because it allows you to show up in a very human and personal way. You see it with Rose also at Patagonia. Obviously they're a leading brand that's always had a responsible mindset. But when it came to access to public lands and giving mining and drilling rights to public lands, Patagonia stood up very clearly and boldly, so much so that they, challenged the president and said, the president stole your land, and they launched a lawsuit against him, all with a view to doubling down on their values, which is to protect everybody's right or to access to public lands. So this is, this was not traditionally in the purview of business. It was not something that people would normally do. Even when I was working on Nike years ago at an ad agency, Wieden & Kennedy, you'd be talking about the brand or you're talking about the product, and you'd be shaping pop culture in terms of those products and so on. But rarely would you actually migrate or elevate issues to, these larger cultural stages that we see today. So with this as context, let's look at the personal benefits of purpose with a little bit of sort of research behind it. The University of Florida found that having purpose or meaning in your life is connected to happiness, life satisfaction, physical health, and even increased health at a cellular level and, improving your immune response. And, that mind-body connection, while it's a whole wormhole in itself, is intuitively sound. You kind of think, well, if I'm feeling better about what I'm doing with my time, then it makes sense that my body responds on a better level. In terms of productivity, HBR and the Energy Project and HBR and Ernst & Young have found that employees are 3 times more likely to stay at their organization and 1.7 times higher in their job satisfaction if the company has a clear sense of purpose. While executives, 84% of executives say it affects an organization's ability to change, and it increases customer loyalty, 80%. Real bottom line benefits to your company. So this is the value of purpose, of personal purpose on a baseline level for your company. And then finally, in terms of fulfillment, Imperative's US Purpose Index study and then the Deloitte's Global Human Capital Trends study, they found that purpose-oriented workers have 64% more fulfillment at work, and 77% of millennials believe purpose is the #1 reason for selecting an employer. Think about that. 77% of the millennials believe purpose is a #1 reason for selecting an employer. And I think we all realize today, talent wars are really tough, and finding good people is really tough. And bringing on board the people that you want to grow your company and who believe in your mission and purpose moving forward is really, really critical. So this is absolutely, vital to achieving those things. So these are the benefits of personal purpose. And really the key thought here is, as you show up to work each day, when you do the work in and around personal purpose, it allows you to get very clear-eyed about why you do it, how you're going to invest your time that day, and how you're going to live your legacy on a daily basis, rather than waiting to the end of your lifetime and saying, well, great, now that I've had a career or I've raised a family or I've done whatever, now I'm going to leave some sort of legacy. It's about living your legacy on a daily basis. So I would ask you a key question here. And again, fire away if you have any other questions in terms of building a culture of purpose, health, and well-being. What is one action you can take tomorrow to start living your legacy? One action you can take to start living your legacy. I mean, few examples. You could start writing blog posts about brands that are making a positive difference, or writing blog posts around your thought leadership on a given topic specific to your industry. Or you might say you want to upgrade the volunteering or contribution that your company, however small, is making. But all of these things, which seem like a give, are in fact a get, because by bringing your personal purpose to life, you get those health, well-being, satisfaction, productivity, fulfillment benefits, which in turn help your company and on a personal level as well. So let's then extrapolate from the personal purpose to your company purpose. So what's the value here? Well, your purpose at a company level is your why you exist, and it should connect the head, heart, and hands of all stakeholders. It shouldn't just be an intellectual idea. It shouldn't just be an emotional idea. It should be something you can activate, that everyone feels like, wow, I can bring this to life in a meaningful way. And you might ask yourself, well, I get all of this in theory. I mean, I understand the idea of purpose, but how does it drive growth? Where's that connective tissue between understanding what your company's purpose is and how it drives growth? And this may seem like a little soft skills compared to looking at a P&L or an actuarial report of your company, but purpose drives the values of your organization, how you behave, how you show up, what you do and don't do. And those values really define the relationships between all key stakeholders, with your suppliers, with your fellow employees, with your customers, with consumers. And increasingly, those relationships define the productivity of your internal stakeholders, employees, your consumer sales or customer sales, and the social impact of your brand at a time when the marketplace is rewarding more and more the positive role that business can play. So that connective tissue is clear in as much as it goes from you on a personal level to a company level to the relationships inside your company to how that company shows up in the world in all its other relationships, which ultimately drive its growth. And again, this is nothing new. I think it's kind of, we're not learning something new, we're just remembering what we forgot, which is really, it all comes down to relationships, how you show up in the world, what you stand for, and how that informs what you make and how you market it. This is almost marketing or business 101, but we're at a moment in time when these fundamentals are more important than ever. And so just a couple of statistics to support this, because, you never want it just to be theory or anecdote. From Cone Communications 2017 Millennial Employee Engagement Study, Friday morning, so early here on LA time. 64% of millennials consider a company's social and environmental commitments when deciding where to work. 64% consider their sort of ESG commitments when deciding where to go to work. Really powerful. 64% won't take a job if a company doesn't have a strong CSR opinion. 64% won't take a job from a company because they assume you don't care about the same things or you don't care. And 88% their job is more fulfilling when the environmental, social, and governance issues are clearer. So again, if you look at your P&L, probably the biggest line item on there is payroll. The money you invest every day in the fantastic people that work with you and around you. The most recent statistic I saw from Gallup was that only 29% of US employees are fully engaged. What other part of your business would you be content to leave optimized only to 29%? And what if that item was the biggest line item on your P&L? So the most expensive investment you make in your company is only being optimized to 29%. Kind of scary, really, when you think about it. It's like we're courting disaster as folks in business. And I think these statistics are even more compelling, which is, Edelman did its 2017 Earned Brand Study, Beyond No Brands Land. And what's instructive, it's a global study of consumers and their mindset. And they looked at belief-driven buyers, which are young people, typically affluent people, the type of folks that, any company would want to be buying their products because, they're the future and they have the buying power. And 57% of belief-driven buyers would buy or boycott a brand based on its position on a social or political issue. Not business issues, social or political. And 65% would not buy a brand if it stayed silent on an issue that it was obliged to address. Silent on an issue. So it might be, women's equality, it might be childhood education, it might be gun control, it might be access to clean water. All of these issues are in the headlines every day. And you have to stand back, look at your business and say, well, if that's the business we're in, what are the issues that are relevant to our purpose, to the role we're playing in society, so that, both our employees and customers can look at you and say, wow, they're part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And then finally, 67% bought a product for the first time because of their position on a controversial issue. Think about that. It's almost 70% for the first time said, hey, I like that brand. I like the way they showed up. I believe what they stand for. I'm going to buy their product. Incredible. So these are all dynamics or market realities that you can leverage to drive your business growth. And if this prompts any questions, please, contact@wefirstbranding.com or put your questions into the Q&A box and we'll answer them at the end. So how do you define your company purpose? 3 quick questions. At WeFirst, we work with a number of startups, high growth brands, and large complex global organizations. We have a methodology that includes a number of different questions that allow us to unearth the purpose of a brand. And here's 3 of them. What is your enemy? Because if you can't decide what you're for, because you're just not clear about it, let's talk about what you're against. So Tesla is against unsustainable transportation. Airbnb is against that homogenous hotel experience that really doesn't foster cultural compassion or understanding or empathy, and it doesn't really, bring the human family closer together. And Uber obviously was launched on the strength of their objection to, that regular taxi experience. Second question, what makes you you? And this slide is not to suggest it's not about big noting, but rather saying, we've been lucky enough to work with Tom's and work with some of the Virgin brands. And, a lot of folks point to Tom's and Blake and Richard at Virgin as the sort of leaders in this purpose space. And, we've been lucky enough to have close proximity to them. And all I would share is from that line of sight is that, when it came to working with the great folks at Tom's, there was a moment in time where I asked Blake, why did you start the company? And he paused and said, I didn't want to start a company. I wanted to get some shoes on that kid's feet. And what we realized in that moment was the enemy of Tom's was not bare feet as much as it was apathy, the idea that you can't do anything to change these seemingly intractable problems. And really, their greatest strength, or what makes them them, is the power of their empathy to really, do something about it and launch a business model, the one-for-one business model, which has now got, a lot of folks using it as well, and they've, drove incredible business growth for them. With Richard Branson and the incredible Virgin team, he was asked, what success looks like for him, and his answer was very instructive. It really was, he said at one point, I've been fighting for my family, for 40 years, and we were killed for each other. And I got a really strong sense of the power of family for him. And what I realized was, what makes the Virgin Group and Virgin Company so unique is that sense of family that they bring to everything. So again, what makes you, you? Can you answer that question? What makes you, you? What is that essence of who you are? And then thirdly, what are you the only of? And obviously these questions are very nuanced in the sense that they're approaching the same topic, you, from different facets. It's like looking at the same diamond from different facets. But what are you the only of? For example, Airbnb is not in the accommodation business. They're in the belonging business. They want to create a world where everyone can belong. And so you can imagine when you answer a wide range of questions like this, you start to see themes emerge or language emerge or patterns emerge that point to what is unique about you. And then you codify that into a very, very simple statement. So here, Airbnb to create a world where everyone belongs, or PwC to build trust in society and solve important problems, or Southwest to give people the freedom to fly. But what's really instructive here is how simple these solutions are. There's no silver bullet here, and there's no miraculous kind of complex language. It's really about the specificity of the idea that defines what your purpose is, and just really articulating that simply and clearly in a way that everyone can understand. And so on the strength of this, we see brands of all types leading with their purpose and leading larger conversations on the strength of their purpose. So Patagonia is leading a global conversation about the responsible economy and responsible growth. Like, how do we grow while being responsible to the planet? Or Tesla, sustainable transportation, or Unilever, sustainable living, or Airbnb. And the point of these large companies is not to point to organizations that have exponential resources, but rather to say, these large companies, which have all the choices in the world in terms of how they go to market, are making the same decision to lead with the role they're playing in the world and to bring it to life in meaningful ways to drive engagement from their employees, customers, and consumers. And so the takeaway here really is the future of profit is purpose, because increasingly the market is rewarding companies that are showing up in terms of their values that are clearly communicating the role they're playing in the world, and that are really becoming movements in their own right by inviting all stakeholders to participate based on shared values and a common goal about what they want the future to look like. So, excuse me, the key question here is, what challenges are you facing in defining your company purpose? Ask yourself, what are the obstacles? Is it a lack of leadership belief in the business case for being purposeful? Are you too siloed around the world? If you're a startup or a solopreneur, do you just not have resources? Do you have no branding or marketing expertise? What are those obstacles in the way? Because if you agree that building a culture of purpose, health, and well-being is going to add value to your company, the first place to start is to ask yourself, well, what's in the way of you doing that? Because if it can have this sort of impact on your growth, and as a function of that, your impact, you have to work out how to overcome those issues. You have to prioritize it more highly. And so how do you go about doing that, building a culture of purpose? Well, let's dive in and have a look at some fundamental kind of mindset issues or strategies, and then some examples. One of the big challenges we see in organizations is to rationalize two competing dynamics. One is the necessary top-down command and control hierarchical organizational structure, where in a lot of companies you see, they've got their mission, vision, values, or purpose at the top, and then they've got their products and services, and then they've got their community engagement. They talk about their impact. And that pretty much maps against the top-down model they have with leadership, managers, employees, and so on. But really, when it comes to being a purposeful culture, and by extension a purposeful brand, you need to flip that upside down and really be community focused, to get off yourself and onto others. And so turn that triangle upside down and lead with your purpose, and bring your values to life, and empower your employees through your products and services to drive community engagement and have an impact in the world. That sounds like a simple difference, but it makes all the difference in the world. And if you don't, the danger here is that you often end up talking in a way that you feel is right because it maps to your top-down hierarchical structure, but you wonder why no one's listening. You wonder why you get no engagement. It's because ultimately you're talking to yourself, because you're talking about what your brand is doing and what your products are all about. Instead of leading with, this is your role in the world and how you want to work with others to achieve it, and therefore here is our company and here is our products. It's a simple difference of come from between how you operate inside an organization and how you talk about, or how you go to market through your marketing. So let's look at some of the ways that this is brought to life to make it real. Leadership really has to set an example. Here at WeFirst, we go out each quarter and we do a volunteer thing, and we were down at a homeless kitchen just before the holidays, and it's a very powerful experience. It makes you very grateful for whatever good fortune you have in your own life, and very empathetic and connected to the other folks that you meet who, deserve the support. And, we should all be responsible for helping those in need. And here you see, leadership at Timberland and Ben & Jerry's, both of which are famous for being, purposeful brands and community-driven brands, and brands that are of service to something higher than themselves. And even, Ben & Jerry, they've been arrested a couple of times in recent years, standing up for what they believe in. So, powerful demonstration of how far they believe you need to go to raise awareness around issues they believe in. Secondly, you need to elevate your employees. There's so many examples of this, but I think this is a great one. If you look at Unilever's recruitment materials, one of the biggest companies in the world, which by all rights should be able to say, hey, come and work for us because, we're fancy and successful. When they put their materials out there, it says bright future made by you. They're not saying, hey, this is about Unilever and so on. This is about made by you. So they're really saying to people, come and work here so that you can bring your talents, your skills, your aspirations to the company so that we can build the future, a bright future. And, you'll notice it says meet our new head of sustainability on all their materials. That's a different person inside the company across across the same material. So everyone's the head of sustainability. And the point is well taken, which is they're saying everyone's responsible for sustainability inside the company. Thirdly, bring your values to life with your employees, whether it's volunteering, as I touched on, or marching. It's the Women's March tomorrow here in Los Angeles and around the country. Just bring your values to life. Make it active. It can't be just sort of something that's written on the wall or a noun. It's got to be an active verb. So look at ways that you can bring it to life, small or large. You know, you may reach out to local entrepreneurs and say, hey, we want to mentor graduating students who don't have much real world experience. And we're not going to put dollars against it, but we're just going to mentor some young people in our community, or we're going to volunteer our time, or we could make a donation, whatever it is, but bring your values to life with your employees. And then when you do it, make sure you celebrate your employees. One of the big misses that we see in brands of all sizes in terms of creating a culture of purpose is not celebrating their employees. And have your values up and around and celebrate employees like you see here at Whole Foods. Make sure that your values are a living and breathing part of your culture. And when it comes to the impact that you want to have, co-create that impact with your employees. Ask them where we should volunteer. And so, you know, we do that at We First. You know, again, a small company, much like many of you who are on this webinar. But, you know, we talk about where we want to volunteer and where we think that would be the most meaningful difference could be made. So it's not prescriptive when it comes to the contribution you're going to make. You know, make it a collaborative discussion. And you see here with Starbucks, you know, they've got their global month of service, and it's the partners who work at Starbucks, because they don't call them employees, who determine what projects they do. And then there's this aggregate of impact through their global month of service. And then finally, reward employees. Like what IBM does is they give, you know, these trips that people can take and these volunteering hours that they can contribute. And they're now, as a result of that, transforming communities in over 120 countries. And this is a powerful experience, you know, as part of IBM's month of service abroad. You know, so it's not just doing good, it's actually adding a meaningful addition to employees' lives. And so really, the key takeaway here is that you need to be the celebrant, not celebrity, of your employees. If you want to create that culture of purpose, health, and well-being, you need to collaborate with your employees to think, how are we going to bring our purpose to life? How are we going to demonstrate our values? How are we going to show up in a way that's going to make a meaningful difference to others? And to hold yourself accountable for that. And, you know, just with that in mind, you know, I think becoming a B Corp or a benefit corporation is a wonderful way to do that too, because it institutionalizes your values as an organization to make sure you're accountable for the impact that you're having. And while that sounds like something that you're doing above and beyond or a requirement of you, it's actually something that's, you know, ultimately a great benefit to you because of the culture it fosters and the way that it leverages your purpose and make sure that you're accountable for it. And so the question here I would ask you is, what's one employee story that you could share to build a purposeful culture? What's one employee story that you're not sharing? It's going on all the time. People are doing amazing things inside your organization, or you're doing amazing things that your small team may not know about, that will build your culture of purpose by sharing it with others. So just start somewhere really, really simple like that. And for example, you may ask your team members to share stories of, you know, what they're contributing to in their life and why it's meaningful to them. Simply by acknowledging that they're doing it, and simply by sharing that, whether they write a short blog post or they take out their iPhone and do a video of them at the pet shelter that they volunteer at on the weekend, whatever it is, it elevates the values of the organization and gives permission for everyone to be seen as a whole human being, not just in their functional role, but in terms of their values and personal purpose. And so I want to recap these 4 key takeaways to inspire any other questions that you might have. The first is, purpose is a way of being that drives business growth. It's not a marketing or communications exercise. It's not a CSR, philanthropy, or impact strategy. Your purpose should impact all aspects of your company, all dimensions of your company. And when we do work with organizations, large and small, we often find that that's one of the first recalibrations that are necessary. Because, and through no fault of anyone, for the past several decades, there's been philanthropy, or there's been CSR, or there's been sustainability, or there's been corporate citizenship. And it's sort of like, that's the part where the business does good. And over here we make money, right? Because that's what we got to do, our shareholders or whatever it might be, or investors and so on. What you're seeing is the wise dissolution of that, where people realize your purpose underscores everything, why you exist. and it informs your suppliers you work with, the culture you build, the products you make, the innovations you drive, how you market, your community impact, and so on and so on. That's when you get a fully integrated, purposeful brand where your culture becomes an expression of your purpose with all those attending benefits like attracting talent, keeping talent, productivity, retention, and so on. The second is purpose is how you live your legacy each day. We've been inside a lot of the, top purpose leading brands, whether it's, we've had chances to work in different ways with Seventh Generation and Cliff Bar and Virgin Unite and Timberland and Tom's and so many other brands that people point to and say, wow, they seem to have got this right. And what we always notice is that purpose and values are part of what they live and breathe each day. They're like the bellows of the organization. And it might be that's a reminder each time that they go into a meeting, or if there's a PR crisis, they go back to their touchstone of what the company stands for, or it informs all their leadership messaging outright and as they go and speak at industry or trade shows. But so when you institutionalize purpose, it becomes how you live your legacy each day, both on a personal level and on a company level. And then, the future of business profit is purpose. As sad as I am to say this, I don't know how we're going to turn back these challenges we face overnight. Climate change, infant mortality, refugees and migration, access to clean water, plastics in the ocean, loss of biodiversity. It's enough to get you really depressed, but it is Friday, which means there's a glass of wine or scotch or whatever it is waiting for you at the end of the day. And if you're on the East Coast, you are dangerously close. You're on the wrong side. You might be heading out of the city. Anyway, all of that is to say that that same challenge is also an opportunity for business, for us to rise to it and to be more purposeful and to bring it to life in more compelling ways at a time when the marketplace is not only rewarding it now, but it will increasingly do so as things like climate change really become something that impacts more and more daily lives. I think here in North America, we've seen crazy climate inconsistencies over the last couple of years. We live here in LA and just have these incredible fires, which are just seem to be the new normal. And there's, tornadoes and hurricanes and all these things going on that are really challenging people's lives. These are all unavoidable, undeniable reminders that something's going on that needs to be addressed. And increasingly, this is shaping the mindset of employees, consumers, and customers to say, hey, are you helping make things better? Are you mitigating the damage you do in terms of recycling and the chemicals you use and what you make? And, are you nurturing your employees in the right way? Are you making a positive contribution? So all of that is to say that as these challenges become more acute, as they will, if you read any of the commentators out there or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC report, which came out recently, which laid it out in very, very specific terms and made it headlines around the world. So all of that is to say that the more purposeful you are, the more relevant you're going to be to playing a role as a solution to these growing challenges. And then be the celebrant, not celebrity, of your employees, and by extension, all of your stakeholders. The most successful brands today are not talking about themselves and their products, but rather they're talking about the role that they want to play in the world and position their company and your products and services as a function of that. You're still saying the same things to a large degree. You're still talking about all the things you want to talk about, but the context and come from is completely different. And it's very, very transformative for an organization in terms of how people view leadership, how the culture is created, how consumers are inspired to buy your products and share them with others, and how fulfilled everybody feels in terms of the role you're playing in shaping our future. So I share all of this. If you are at that point in time where you go, you know what, this all makes sense. I don't know what our purpose is and I don't know where to start, or we've been saying lots of purposeful things, but we're kind of schizophrenic and we don't know how to connect the dots. Or you have been saying something well about your purpose. You've been communicating that effectively for a while, but now you find everyone in your category saying the same thing. So how do you say it better? or how do you evolve it to cut through and sort of differentiate yourself from competitors, I encourage you to just check out wefirstworks.com. It's an online platform that we created that has a couple of courses on there now. One is in how to define your personal purpose, and the other is how to define your company purpose. And we created that because our mission here is really to help business become a force for good. Our purpose is to leverage the power of storytelling to help business become a force for good. And to that end, you've got large brands and high growth brands and startups that we do consulting with, but at the same time, you don't want that to be cost prohibitive. So we created these courses so that you get, high-end expertise like ours based on our experience with all these top purposeful brands very cost effectively, so you can benefit from it as well. And in our sense, then we can cover off, and help those that don't have great resources to put against doing this work, those that have more resources and those who have large resources. So you'll see quotes on here from folks who've been doing the personal purpose course or the company purpose course, and it's really proven to be incredibly effective. We spend a lot of time working with folks to work out exactly what to say and how to say it for it to be most effective. So what you'll find, is, downloadable workbooks and tools. There's live, there's video lessons and tips. There's office hours when you can call in and ask direct questions specific to your business, and you get a, certificate of completion at the end. And you'll see personal purpose really helps you understand your purpose gaps, how to write a purpose statement, creating an action plan, and how to move your purpose forward. While, on the company level, we assess your purpose challenges, you draft your company purpose statement, and you create a strategic plan and also explore how to bring that purpose to life through your culture. So we put all this together to make it available to everybody as effectively as possible, because we need this as business leaders. We need business to become a force for good. We need not only the big companies to change what they're doing because of their scale of impact, but younger, smaller companies to be best equipped to succeed in the marketplace. So if you're passionate about unlocking all the benefits of purpose on a personal and a company level, go to wefirstworks.com, check it out, and we really, really know it'll be incredibly helpful. So we'd now like to shift to Q&As. Fire away with anything that could help your business. It's not that what I've shared today sounds simple. It's not simple. And in practice, it's complicated. So please do ask specific questions so that we can offer the most value, because we really appreciate your time on a day like today. So let's go with the first question. Sally, how do companies nurture an employee's personal purpose at work? It's a great question. So how do companies nurture an employee's personal purpose at work? Well, it starts at the onboarding process, where if you're about to bring somebody on board, part of the questions you ask is not just how they are a fit for you, but how you as a company can support their personal purpose. And so getting clear about that is very important in the first place. They may not have it completely well articulated as yet, but you can certainly have a discussion around what they want to see for themselves and how they see realizing what they want for themselves by working at the company. So that's the beginning of the onboarding process. Then you might, once they've joined the company, you might send them a series of videos where you've gone around to different members, different employees in the company, and share videos of them talking about what's important to them and how that informs their daily life and how that makes them feel about the work that the company's doing. So suddenly you've gone from, hey, we're going to hire you, to nothing, crickets for 6 weeks, and then you're going to start and you've got no idea who the company is, and it's a cold start. Instead, every week, if you send them a video that you can set up in an automated fashion, they go, wow, I'm getting to know the people here. I'm getting to know what they care about. I see values inform what's going on. You've already created a meaningful impact even before they've started. Then once they're at the company, you should institutionalize the purpose and values of the company in a way so that their personal purpose can play a role in that. Volunteer days, and also give them an opportunity to play different types of roles. They may want to write blog posts, they may want to volunteer, they may want to donate, whatever it might be. But whatever is an expression of their personal purpose can be brought to life through the company. So the larger theme here is from day one, the onboarding process, to elevate the purpose of the company and to identify what that individual wants for themselves. Excuse me, coughing. for themselves, and then to build that into a way of being at the company itself. So I hope that helps. Let's have a look at a next one. From Frank, where is the best place to start to build a culture of purpose internally? For example, if you've got a small business and only a few employees. Well, it's a great question. And I think one of the most powerful places to start is through a collaborative exercise where you go, let's take the time to work out what the company purpose is. And that's why we created the courses at WeFirstWorks. And back to that other question, about how you nurture an employee's personal purpose. Help them. Let them do the course to find out what their personal purpose is. It's really hard to do on your own because it's hard to read the label from inside the jar. So let them do the course. It's an investment in them that will pay you huge dividends at the company. Secondly, when it comes back to, how you nurture inside the organization, I think if you've only got a few employees, make sure that they're clear about what their personal purpose is. And then I would ask all the employees to come together and to decide what you want to contribute to as an organization. So it might be homelessness, it might be volunteering, it might be women's equality, it might be, pay gap, it might be anything. But you get a consensus as an organization of what you want to contribute to and how you want to contribute. Or you might say, on a monthly basis, we're going to reinvent what we contribute to. So we might say, we're going to volunteer or contribute or whatever it might be to a certain cause. And each month or each quarter, we're going to decide collaboratively what that is so people can each get a time or a turn having something they're particularly passionate about being reflected. So I think the first place to start is working out not only what your company purpose is, but then how it's going to be expressed in terms of impact. And then all these other bells and whistles around, institutionalizing volunteering or celebrating your values at town hall meetings or, group meetings or, elevating employee stories through videos and so on. All of those things can come afterwards, but get clear about your purpose and your impact in the first place. Let's have a look at another question. Chris, can you elaborate with more examples on the come from in how to communicate about products and services through blog posts or social media posts? My purpose is building companies through operational excellence and financial clarity, starting from a place of self-care and self-love. Let me just repeat that so I'm clear. My purpose is building companies through operational excellence and financial clarity, starting from a place of self-care and self-love. I think that's really powerful. Thanks, Chris. We're kindred spirits, I feel, Chris, because you're looking at that connective tissue between the individual and how they feel about themselves and how they nurture themselves and how that then plays out and benefits the company. And so to your question about how do you communicate your come from, here's the crux of the issue in my mind. We often get this challenge from companies who go, well, okay, if we're going to be purposeful, how much of our budget do we carve out to purpose? First answer to that is 100%, in the sense that purpose should inform everything. But secondly, they go, well, there's this tension between brand marketing, where we talk about what we stand for, and product marketing, so we've got to sell stuff that we do. The reality is that they're two sides of the same coin. So when you're writing a blog post or a social media post, some of them should be related to what you stand for. They might be values propositions, that are unique to you, Chris, and what you believe. And you'll see if you look at WeFirst channels, we put quotes up there that I or others have said. We take quotes from the book WeFirst. We celebrate statements by other people that align with our beliefs. That's all brand level marketing. That's all communicating your come from a purpose level. But at the same time, you'll see other posts which talk about what you do from a product or service level. And the way to think about it is this. You can either talk at the higher level of your purpose and then point back to your products as social proof of that. So you're writing a blog post around, operational excellence and financial clarity, and where it starts, well, it starts from self-love. And that's the higher order message. At other times, you could write a blog post around the 3 key steps to operational excellence, or the 3 key mistakes to avoid, or whatever it might be, which speak directly to your product or service. And then at the end of that post, you can point back to ultimately these steps or these mistakes to avoid are all critical because we believe X, Y, and Z, and it points back to your purpose. So you can lead with your purpose and point to the product, or you can start with your product and point back to your purpose. They're two sides of the same coin. And so there's no choice. This is a false separation that people have in their mind between brand and product marketing. It should infuse everything you do, but specific to the channel and the audience, you should calibrate those two approaches. So if you're doing a speech at an industry forum, you may start with your brand work, but if you're doing sales collateral to some of your clients, you may start with products and then point back to your purpose, whatever it might be. So I hope that helps. Right. Darren, I get personal purpose and company purpose, solid concepts for future success, but they seem to be branding and marketing. Does a company actually have to integrate what a purpose into what a company does and create measurable differences that help the planet? So, great question. I made the larger point that purpose is why you exist and it should apply to all departments of a company. What does that look like? The short answer is yes, for two reasons. One, if you're going to be purposeful, you want to do it right. So what that means is you should apply it to all aspects of your company. So if you're working with a supplier who doesn't align with your values, whether you make candles that you sell at local street markets, fashion or apparel that you sell through e-com, or large industrial machines that you sell to corporate customers, if your suppliers aren't in alignment with the values of the company, you should consider that. When you look at your corporate culture and HR policies, do you celebrate diversity and inclusion? Are you creating a culture of purpose? Are you rewarding purposeful activities by your employees? So that's another part that it can apply to. When you look at the products you make, are you selling products that really aren't that responsible and that really expose you to consumer or media activism because they say, hey, this is not good for us, people, or the planet? And how can you avoid that? So how do you drive innovation on the strength of your values and purpose? And then are you doing enough community impact work? So yes, it should apply to all different aspects of your business. And it may mean stopping doing certain things, and it may mean starting doing other things. But either way, it's kind of bringing alignment in between who you are and your purpose and what you do. And I'll tell you one of the most powerful benefits of this, Chris, is that the more you do that, the less time you waste worrying about what competitors are doing, what you're seeing in other markets, second guessing what you're doing, because you become your own compass in terms of deciding what to do and what not to do. And it's an incredible value add to the company in terms of not wasting energy, second guessing what the market wants, what your stakeholders want, what competitors are doing, because you've got your own compass. Really, really powerful stuff. So I hope that helps. And we've got Bill here. Interesting news with some brands acting purposely. On one hand, Delta Airlines contributing funding to the opening of the Martin Luther King National Park amidst the shutdown. On the other hand, Gillette with their controversial ad this week. How does a brand make sure to get it right? Well, what I'd say is there's no safe place anymore. You know, this whole mentality of risk mitigation and risk aversion is not something the marketplace rewards today. Why do I say that? If the market is rewarding brands playing a larger and more meaningful role in, you know, shaping culture and wading into social conversations, you've got so many different points of view, and you're always going to have polarized opinions, and you're always going to upset somebody. That's why I gave the example of Howard Schultz saying you can sell your shares. He knew that he was going to alienate a lot of the shareholders in the room and consumers out there, but at the same time, he deepened the loyalties of those who aligned with their values. So, you know, you have to have a healthy tolerance for risk. You have to develop a healthy relationship with anxiety, shall we say. Or you might say, you know what, this is too hard. Let's just avoid the issue. But as the, you know, Edelman research showed, sitting on a fence, you get penalized for that. And what typically happens is that that vacuum you leave in terms of what you stand for or your voice in a relevant cultural issue gets filled with misunderstanding or misinformation where people assume you don't care. Or if you're smaller, competitor with less credentials, with an inferior product, is talking more effectively about what they stand for, they'll quickly go and buy something from them because they feel more aligned with them. So it's going to cost you. In terms of getting it right, each of those examples I could speak to directly. I think Gillette's intent was correct, but I think their execution, it was problematic. I think, Delta and other brands are showing up and supporting federal workers right now during the shutdown in a way that is very positive for their brands. And they're seeing incredible efforts by federal workers supporting each other. And it's really uniting the whole community in a time which is otherwise very divisive. So how do you get it right? I think the greater clarity you have around your purpose, and the more committed you are to that in terms of the integrity and accountability of what you are doing, in terms of, hey, really, you do the work on your supply chain, you do the work on your HR department, you do the work on your products and its innovation, and yes, CSR, philanthropy, and community impact work. That's the first way to get it right. The second way to get it right is that if you make a mistake, you own it, and you take conscious steps to fix it as quickly as possible. As you saw with Starbucks around racial profiling, the new CEO, Kevin, went straight down to the store the next day, said, yes, it was racial profiling. We're going to close our 8,000 stores. We're going to do 4 hours of training and so on. And interesting or instructively, they then, some people don't know this, but what the upshot of that is the two gentlemen who are racially profiled was they got $5 each. And I believe a $250,000 donation was made to an organization that addresses this issue. And now they're working with Starbucks on a program to make sure it doesn't happen again. So a very powerful demonstration about what to do when it goes wrong. And the only other thing I would say is, the third thing is, you can control the narrative. So in terms of how you get it right, no company is all perfect. And again, to your point, across the board, supply chain, internal culture. And for a lot of companies, that makes them fearful to say anything. So they're not going to put their hand up because they don't want the scrutiny, because they haven't got it all right. They don't want to say anything. And that, as I said, is very costly. Instead, you control the narrative by getting out in front of it and saying, at Company X, we make whatever we make, and we're doing this well, and we're really excited about it, and we're working on innovating that even more. But there are areas that we think we can improve, X, Y, and Z, and here's what we're doing to do that. So you get out in front of any consumer or media activism by calling out issues that you're aware of that you need to work on, and explain what you're doing to that end, and actually invite your customer or consumer base to collaborate with you on that. Say, what would you like to see? Or what sort of changes do you want to see? Or we're thinking about addressing it this way. And you see this in some of the top flight brands. So for example, Patagonia in their Footprint Chronicles campaign, if you go to their website, you'll see that, you can enter the SKU number of a jacket, and it will tell you the carbon footprint of making that item, and the cotton or the fabrics and dyes involved and so on. And they'll tell you the good, the bad, and what they think. So they get out in front of it by telling you the areas where they think they could do better. And so when you step back from all of this and you're a little anxious about putting your hand up and talking about what you stand for and potentially alienating some part of the market, it actually is pretty logical to step back and say, listen, this is who we are, and this is what we stand for, and this is what we care about. And we realize we're not going to be all things to all people and please everyone all the time. And we're not going to get everything right all the time. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what we're doing well in the context of being service to something higher than ourselves. And then we're going to talk about what we could do better. And we'd love to let there be an ongoing discussion with you. But here is our guiding purpose. Here is, what we're doing to achieve that. And here's the work that we need to do. And I think any reasonable human being would go, wow, I appreciate the candor, the honesty, the transparency, the accountability. I like what you stand for. Totally get it that you haven't got it all right. No one's got it all right. And people are very clear-eyed and reasonable when it comes to those terms. So, there's an expression I like, which is, if you don't like risk, you're going to hate irrelevance. And that's the danger of not being purposeful, of not bringing that to life across your entire company and not sharing that with others. And I think this is a marketplace that is going to demand more purposeful communication, and activation across your entire company. And if you approach it this way, you can do it with confidence, but then also realize there will be the odd misstep. And when that happens, you know how to react to it. So, if you haven't started on your purpose, you don't have enough clarity around it, or you think you're schizophrenic in your marketing, I would, invite you to check out We First Works. Those courses are incredibly affordable. It's consciously designed to take all this pattern recognition and learning and insights that we've done through all our consulting work and to share them with you so that you can really unlock the value of it and play a truly meaningful role in driving growth with impact. And so that's why we created it, wefirstworks.com. If there's any questions that I haven't answered that are important to you, please, email contact@wefirstbranding.com, or you can reach me directly at simon@wefirstbranding.com. I really hope this webinar was useful. We're at the start of a new year. The issues that we face collectively, in the human family on this planet of finite resources are becoming more acute. The scrutiny on business to be purposeful is elevating. The examples of brands being purposeful and, standing up for things higher than themselves are becoming clearer every day, whether it's Nike or Gillette and others. And this is the new normal. And I really invite you to embrace it to the benefit of your business. And when you do so, you'll not only find you can drive growth for your company, but you'll find greater fulfillment from your work as well. So I hope that was useful. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody, and look forward to sharing some more thinking soon. Alrighty, bye from everyone here at We First.